The preservation of lambs is the only sustainable way to cater to wolves. So this video is going to be a response to Lucky Ghost's really nice video, the single biggest problem that Ashes of Creation faces. But first, guys, please, this is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We have a passion-driven, big studio project that isn't putting bottom line first, and you guys want to turn it into solo PvE? Come on now. We got to get what we can get. This might be our only chance, and there's going to be the Riot MMO and many other MMOs to come out to sate any kind of solo PvE player. Now, the argument, of course, that people make is it's not just about maximizing Steven's income, which he seems to not really be that concerned with, but they're concerned that there just won't be enough audience to continue development. I can assure you that that is not going to be the case. If you have a devoted fan base, it can get pretty small, even though I think Steven says there's already expecting about 1 million people to start. And that can carry it forward for many years to come, I'm sure, as long as the game is good, and we're about to get into some of that. But there is one actual grievance that I think people are maybe not voicing as clearly as they could. I know I've seen some people cover in their content, but that is the server merger issue. No matter how good Ashes of Creation is, chances are that there's going to be some kind of a contraction at some point. You know, even if it's 2 years down the line, whatever it might be, people are just going to start losing interest and the servers are going to shrink. Obviously, since the world is developed by the players and all of their interactions, that means that I've developed my country here, and if the server merger happens, somebody else had developed a country here. How do you combine them? There's many ways you can do it, events and competitions, but that is a valid concern that I'm sure that the Intrepid Studio team is definitely going to be giving a good bit of thought to, but I don't think they've got it all sorted out. But let's get right into the very first point. So the very first point is, obviously it's Intrepid's goal to make a system that works, okay? That doesn't mean that it's going to be rampant griefing, that's just going to be as bad or worse than any other game you've played. Obviously the goal is to create something that is better. Now, I think that the very valid problem with that is to say the actual direction that they're going is impossible. And to get it perfect, absolutely. But obviously it's impossible to get anything perfect. So that's not really that much of a concern. It's just about how many people can you get to enjoy the game. And I think it's absolutely 100% dead on to focus on less quitting experiences. And that can actually just come from gameplay. I've mentioned this many times before, but even things like very timer-driven gameplay that seems like I never have my timer. The enemy always seems to have their timer, even though, of course, they don't, but I only notice it when they do. And so all the interactions feel unfair, might cause me to quit. All of these things are things you're trying to manage. You're trying to smooth out these kind of barbs. And a huge one is griefing, particularly griefing that's night ruining. Like you just had one night to play the game, you logged on with your friends on Friday, and as Lucky Ghost was saying, you'd have a group of rogue griefers just absolutely own you at the entrance of a dungeon or even inside of a dungeon. That's something we're going to get into. But I do have a system that I'd like to propose, and I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it because I don't want to bait you into the having to watch this whole thing. I don't know if it's been done before, and you can tell me in the comments if you know that it has. But I know that things like, I think NVIDIA Shield has functionality that works similar to this. And I'm going to discuss a couple ways that it could be made even more effective or efficient. But I think that something that might help curtail griefing a bit is recording. So what I mean by that is all players are going to be basically writing to the server, maybe 2 minutes to 5 minutes, some kind of a buffer, could even be less than that if it's too taxing. And you're writing into this buffer that is basically just being constantly refreshed until an event occurs. When an event occurs, like some kind of a PvP event, and you are defeated, or maybe you were flagged for PvP, you can choose to appeal that result. Then that chunk, whatever is in memory, might be as much as 5 minutes, is recorded and saved, and then processed by a jury of peers or whatever. You could play around with that system. Now that might sound like a whole lot of data, and if you're just recording a high definition video, yeah, that's going to be really expensive. But the game, since it's multiplayer, is already serialized. So that means that it's being transferred so that one computer can read the data from another. And that information is usually kept very small, very light. So you can actually reconstruct the game from the same data that is being used for multiplayer data. And of course, when you're talking about like global or even local chats, not every single player has to record the chat every time. You just simply have to record that once. So the player would only be recording their movement, their inputs, things like that, and the chat would be recorded for the entire instance or even world. So it could be done that you would have this sort of event reconstruction system so that you can say, hey, look, I didn't really mean to do it. Here it is. People can watch it and make a judgment to repeal whatever kind of punishment is given to you or not. It's a pretty big disincentive to bad behavior to know that you're being recorded. So even if it never went to jury, just the fact that you know you're being recorded, I think is going to curtail a lot of the bad behavior. But the stuff I'm going to talk about next is, I think, just as important to get right. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention, I know that it seems like a very easy solution would be to just have PvE servers and PvP servers. Well, the problem with that is pretty simple. You've got extremely complicated systems here. This isn't just a game where like, okay, I flagged PvP and now I can just, hit some guy as long as he's within a radius of, or not a radius of town or something that rudimentary. You actually have a lot of systems that are interconnected and absolutely depend on one another. The way that conflicts are resolved and all this, it's very important for the game's design to either have or not have PvP. If you're trying to have both, you either need to sacrifice one experience or you are doubling, in effect, your design work for those systems. So it's not an easy way out. It may actually be more efficient to just simply try to create one unified system that can cater to both. So let's discuss how that can happen. Now, we're going to talk about what the true PvE content really is. And I think that for me, it's a challenging instance. And I use the word instance very willfully here. I want to be exact. I don't think, and I've experienced it in EverQuest, for instance. I used to like the fact in EverQuest that you would go to a zone, there was only one of that zone. Modern EverQuest has made it so that there's instancing and there's multiple versions and you can pick your version. And really, once you've done that, you might as well just give every group its instance, because there's not much that is gained by having other people potentially taking your camps, and especially in the modern design of, I'm thinking like New World Expeditions, for instance, which I've just been playing a bunch of. These are more event driven, they're more story driven, they're much more cohesive experiences. It's not just a mob that's waiting in that room over there to get killed, and then another one over there. So really, if you're designing a modern dungeon, you almost need to have an instance. And that makes it so that once you're in the instance, obviously you're not going to want to create a system, though you could, where an enemy can come into your instance. And now I'm thinking of something more like, Elden Ring, and then attack you. But if they did, it would be maybe part of some kind of an event or something that's controlled for. It's not this chaotic, griefing deluxe like rogue waiting to gank your healer right as the tank pulls sort of nonsense. We've all been around the block. That's one of the nice things about Intrepid and about AOC in general, is it is being made by people who know these things, and I hope won't begin there and then have to correct for it. I think we have enough foresight to see that that is not going to work. Now, will they have instances in alpha or beta? I'm not sure, but I think that is going to be something that if we want to have PvE content that is really a reward for the PvX and PvP content, you're going to want to have that PvE content be challenging in and of itself, not challenging because you're getting griefed. So really what the goal becomes is to have the feeling of, maybe instances aside, but the world in general should have areas that is PvP basically off, PvP toggle, optional, PvP mandatory. You can make this discrete. You can say capital, no PvP, doesn't matter what. this level of node, all right, now you can toggle and people might be PvPing. And then in the borderland, you don't get an option, you've got to PvP. That's the brute force way of doing it, and it could be done. So we're already talking about a solution that might work. But it isn't the most elegant way to do it, and it's not going to be the most fun way to do it. Nothing is going to be more aggravating than having your enemy having worked their way through the PvP mandatory zone, just sneaking around, crawling around, get into your hometown and just be chilling there because you can't hurt them. We're going to get into how we might fix that through factions and the such. But really, I want to make clear what the goal is in my mind. In my mind, the disincentive and the structures should feel such that killing somebody in the capital is just suicide and isn't going to hurt the person you killed much at all, and it's going to hurt you for doing it. Killing somebody in a contested land, but not really the border, something like an encroaching that you're doing into a village or something, could be bad, but it's still something that could be done. There's a bit of risk there. And then killing people in the open borderland, contested zones that isn't really controlled by anybody is absolutely 100% good to go. Like, that's what you're supposed to be doing out there, right? Like, you're trying to win that territory. So I think that what this means to me is that we absolutely are going to need to see a very strong structure and system around factions in their relationship to locations. So that means when you have that country structure that we've seen in the nodes, where you've got the capital coming down to, metropolis, and coming down to the smaller cities and then the towns and villages and camps and so on, then those node structures form a country, and you can become a citizen, in essence, of that country. And when you become a citizen of that country, you gain certain protections, you gain certain privileges and rights, but you also are kind of saying, hey, I'm on your side. So if I go and I just murder another citizen from the country, I'm going to start becoming persona non grata to this area. And what you can do to immediately curtail the efficacy of griefing, yes, okay, there can be ways that you can get around it. There's going to be ways you can get around everything. That's almost not a valid statement. Our goal here is to make it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse for the griefers until finally it's like a funny thing when it happens. Like, oh, look, there's a griefer, and then you kill that griefer and they go away for a while. The way you can do that is by making it so that they can't spawn anywhere within that country. If they've become completely 100% red, let's just say, against this country, maybe they're heroes in their homeland, but here they're red. Okay, that's not how you start. You can start as a neutral stranger, as I've talked about in previous videos, but you can become red to this country. You ain't spawning in this country, okay? So that means that the size of the world now really works towards our advantage, because that griefer's got a 20-minute walk. And I don't believe in the mandatory just to loot yourself corpse run. It should be if I want to go back, I got to walk there, but my corpse is done. Like, they're going to take whatever they took from it. It's a done deal. I don't have to go back and loot it or get back experience by praying at the tombstone that I left behind. Nothing.
Is there any special arrangement you would like for the body?
It is only an empty shell now. Please treat it as such.
If I want to go back and continue to engage in the griefing, or in the, let's not call it griefing, because it's not, let's face it, it's not always going to be griefing, guys. Sometimes it's going to be legitimate gameplay. So let's say that we're invading a territory. This is what we do. This is what the game's about. It's about wars and things. So I'm at war with this place. If I lose here, if we didn't capture this territory here so that we can spawn at, I'm spawning over here. So it's extremely hard to launch an offensive at a node that's in the middle of a country from this other country, because I have a 20-minute walk and you've got a 20-second walk. So I kill you, you're back almost immediately. You kill me, I'm got a 20-minute walk. But if we take over this territory and expand our influence, then now the contested zones naturally become where combat takes place and where it's on more even ground. Next, I wanted to very briefly address the fact that there are people who will constantly say, well, we just need a better type of player. Like, we just need to change the players and the culture around MMOs so that there's not griefing and everything. Listen, I absolutely believe, because I've been there. I've been the guy that just got on there to grief long, long ago. This was over 20 years ago. And I'm better now. I won't say that I'm like perfect, but I'm not going to just go out of my way to ruin I don't have the time to ruin somebody's night, really. I'm the guy who gets his night ruined now more than anything else. But the point is, you're not going to change people because there's always a fresh batch of chuckleheads coming up straight out of whatever, elementary school. I don't know what age kids are playing MMOs at nowadays, but I know my brother was playing in elementary school. So what are you going to do? You're not going to change an elementary school kid and suddenly give them like the honor code of the samurai, you know? And finally, let me discuss what I think is actually going to be one of the biggest concerns if the system is done correctly. That is to say, griefing is disincentivized, but PvP is still a thing and it's still a concern. Now you might think, is it going to be something like what people have said, where there's just going to be ghost town everywhere? Nobody wants to play the game because it's too scary? No, I think that what's going to end up happening is what has happened to a lot of the WoW servers that are PvP, which is that you just become a monolithic single faction kind of entity. Now, the nice part about Ashes of Creation is that there isn't really factions, but there does have to be factions at the end of the day, even if they're actually not explicit. Like even if you just say, hey, look, we're all cool, we all live by this code sort of thing, and 99% of players follow that code and end up not killing anybody at any times, and caravans are just going unimpeded and et cetera, and there's only the occasional little like saucepan that pops up for a while and you bonk them on the head and they go away. That's not that much fun either, right? So that is my biggest concern, is that everything is going to become this mono nation where nobody really has conflict except in very controlled fashion, which might as well be arenas and battlegrounds and things like that. Now, as I said, it's nice that there's no factions per se. There's no horde and alliance in Ashes of Creation, but that is going to make it a little bit easier to achieve this. Yeah, there might be a little bit more fluidity. There might be a conflict that breaks off enough of a segment to have a war, and there's a moment of energy and excitement for PvP, which is cool. Like that's really what I'm here for. But there's also going to be basically no barrier to entry. You don't have to request a faction change or something. You just go, all right, hands up, I'm coming into town. Hey, I'm one of you now, you know? So unless you've been the absolute jerk of the world where nobody wants you around, you can probably do that. And so people will just accrete where the power and the safety and all the loot is and all the best markets are. Because why am I going to join the faction that's over here, like no markets, nothing, you know, like they got nothing and these guys have everything. Let me think, right? So that's going to be the biggest problem, is just the gravity of power, accreting everything into one mass that is basically going to be like a PvE server. And that's what I wanted to say about this subject, guys. I know it's a complicated one and there really aren't any perfect solutions, but please, let's not let this opportunity pass us by. We got Steven Sharif speaking to us from his IRL palace, just asking us what we want, and let's not go, please give us more of what we already have and we're going to get from the Riot MMO. We're going to get from the MMO after that. Let's try to explore some new things, see if things are possible with passion, with knowledge. And if not, hey, listen, I'm playing New World right now. I know a lot of people probably drop New World right away. I can tell you New World probably changed dramatically since the launch because I didn't play at launch, but it's a fun game now. So obviously, there can be course corrections if needs be, but let's not let this opportunity for something different pass us by. Let me know what you want to see in Ashes of Creation in the comments below, and please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.